Should we go? All right. Good morning, everyone. This is Cindy Lane, and I have the privilege of pinch hitting for Regent Kiblinger today. So please give me grace if I don't follow through with things exactly as we need to. So we'll call the meeting to order, and I just have some of our reminders that please state your name before speaking so those listening know who you are. Those not on the committee or speaking should keep their cameras off and microphones muted, please. Members, you can choose to be recognized, but I'm also very comfortable with you just jumping in as you feel you'd like to speak. Amy will also monitor the Zoom's chat and the raise your hand features for questions or comments. And just a reminder that we are being live streamed for the public on KBOR's YouTube channel. So Amy, we're ready for you to take roll, please, members and presenters.
Thank you. Good morning or afternoon. We have Regent Lane.
Present.
Regent Mendoza.
Present.
Regent Benson.
Present.
We also have presenters on the line today. We have Jennifer Armour.
Present.
Thank you. Tara Labar.
I'm here.
We have Joanne Brewer.
Here.
Thank you, Joanne. And we have Daniel Archer.
Here.
And that completes roll call.
Thank you very much. So I think we're now ready for approval of minutes. Take a motion.
I would move for approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Very good. So and now we're ready to receive a report on the state authorization reciprocity agreement from Jennifer.
Hello, good morning, everyone. SARA stands for the State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement and allows degree granting institutions to offer distance education in member states without seeking approval from each state. The board serves as the state portal entity, approving the participation of Kansas institutions. I want to share a few highlights with you from the written report provided on page 6 of your agenda. Membership and institutional participation remain relatively flat from last year. Membership was maintained from 49 states, 2 territories, and the District of Columbia, with California remaining the only state not a member of SARA. There are now over 2,300 participating institutions, with 47 of those being in Kansas. Institutions participating must annually provide distance education enrollments and out-of-state learning placements to the National Council. The enrollment data released for 2021 reports over 18,000 out-of-state students were enrolled in participating Kansas SARA institutions, and over 13,000 Kansans were enrolled out of state. The out-of-state learning placement data reported during that time showed over 3,900 out-of-state students placed in Kansas, and over 3,500 students were placed out of state. Most of these placements were in health professions and related programs. Since SARA has been collecting enrollment data for 7 years, and their methods have become more standardized in recent years, I took the opportunity to present the enrollment data over the last 5 years. This is represented in the chart on page 9. And shows both the enrollments of out-of-state students in Kansas and Kansans enrolled in institutions out of state. All of this data provided in the report is available in interactive dashboards at nc-sara.org. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any questions or comments, members? Jennifer, I had a question, and certainly your insight in this would be helpful, and Dr. Archer, yours as well. But it just made me wonder, looking at the numbers, whether or not we're really leveraging this strategy as much as we should to try to increase the actual number of students who are coming to our universities for these online opportunities. I'm thinking of out-of-state students.
I think that's more of a enrollment management kind of discussion with each institution. Are they, working towards growing their online enrollments and what their strategies are there?
Anything to add, Dr. Archer?
Yeah, and we're still in the plus.
Right.
So, which is good. I mean, there's always going to be people. There's so many of these are concentrated like in Arizona and so forth. So there's always going to be people pursuing. It's kind of an open marketplace essentially. So obviously we want to keep as many in, but we also have to have the flexibility of letting others come in so we can go into their states. So.
Yes, I appreciate that. I just wonder if we shouldn't be leveraging trying to attract more students coming into our programs. And so your thoughts are that there are opportunities there perhaps?
There are, but and I honestly am not, as Jennifer noted, there's a really specific kind of like sub-enrollment strategy, enrollment management strategy for distance education students. And that's not something we've really talked about here before. So I definitely would defer to the institutions more on strategies that they have in that particular space.
I don't know if there are any of the universities online that want to comment on that. All right, hearing none. Thank you very much for the report. I appreciate the information. So now, Tara, we're ready to hear about open education resources.
Yes, good morning. I'm going to share my screen here. Let me get that set up for you. And perfect. So I teased this morning a little bit that I had an OER steering committee meeting yesterday, and I made the mistake of asking them what they wanted me to share with you this morning. And so my rather short list turned got longer. But the good news is there's lots of good news to share with you today from our OER steering committee and from what's been happening on the OER front in Kansas. So first thing I want to tell you is about the OER showcase that's happening tomorrow at the Capitol. This is the first time we've done this. We'll have 11 institutions represented in the rotunda on the first floor from 8:30 to 3. And full transparency, they're excited to see you. So hopefully
Hint, hint, right?
make your way over after breakfast and at least to say hi. You can see the institutions that will be represented tomorrow. We'll have all of our universities there and then a few of our community colleges. Each institution has a display, a poster that shows the different OER open education resource and initiatives they have going on their campus. We'll have some displays educating folks about open education resources. We'll have a postcard that visitors and legislators and frankly, anybody walking through will get to take home with them. And we'll just be visiting with folks all day long about open education resource. What is it, why, and why that's important as a resource in Kansas. And speaking of our postcard, this is the first side of our postcard that we'll be sending home with folks. It talks a little bit about what is open education resources. And really it's just a tool to help make education more affordable for students. Gives faculty the ability to retain, reuse, revise, remix, and redistribute their curriculum using openly sourced materials. This could be TED Talks, this could be videos, this could be all sorts of different types of different ways of learning. And it's not the only way. It's not to say textbooks and traditional published materials will go away. It's just a matter of mixing them in because we also have seen the costs of curriculum and textbooks outpace inflation by about 4 times the rate of inflation since the 70s. So it is probably one of the biggest cost increases on our students. And it's one of, basically next to tuition, it's one of the biggest cost concerns that our students have. So it's a big benefit that we can give to our students as well. You can see on there that the average annual cost for books and supplies at our Kansas College universities is about $1,300 right now. And so what we find is our students on campus will maybe wait to purchase a textbook, or they'll share a textbook, or they will rent a textbook. And you can see that the students that are at most risk for affording those curriculum materials are the same ones that probably are the ones that will wait, and then are the ones that are least likely to pass the course. So it's all the same. The students that are most at risk to persist through higher education are the ones that will be impacted by higher cost of curriculum. So again, OER, it's one of those things that we can do that benefits all students and that has a really big benefit for our most at-risk populations. So and it also has a benefit for faculty too. We see increases in freedom in pedagogy, and allows faculty to kind of provide more relevant and engaging materials. And OER is not a new thing. So there are test banks now. Every year there are increasingly more resources for our faculty to engage. So like I said, it's not something that will ever take over the curriculum for all of our courses, but it is something that is increasing over time, and that's certainly a benefit for our students and faculty across the system. So that's a little bit about the OER soapbox that we'll be sharing with folks tomorrow. The first thing they wanted me to tell you about was our new OER discipline liaisons. And you can see the faculty that we have signed up this year. These are faculty across the system from different discipline areas. And they have volunteered to be contacts. A lot of these discipline liaisons have run roundtable sessions for faculty across the system just to start a conversation about OER in their discipline area. But they've also volunteered to say, hey, I use OER in my content area. And if you have questions about getting started or want to learn something or just want to talk to somebody about it, give me a shout. I can at least, maybe that's not maybe I'm a chemistry teacher and you're a biology teacher, but maybe I can point you in the right direction. So these are our discipline liaisons, and we're always looking for more disciplines to come online, but we're really excited about this start here. So that's brand new for this academic year. Our KBOR OER faculty workshops, we started this series in 2021 with a membership with the Open Education Network out of the University of Minnesota. And we started with 11 OER faculty workshops. And the design of this faculty workshop is an introduction to OER. And then at the end of this faculty workshop, faculty participants are invited to engage with a text in the open text library. And if they review one text, any text in the open text library, and then submit an online review, they were eligible for a stipend. And we had grant funds here at KBOR that we would pay faculty members a small stipend for submitting an online text review. So again, an invitation to engage with an open text. And through this program, we found that if we could get faculty to engage with an open textbook, they're more likely to kind of pursue that and adopt. So you can see from our numbers, in 2021, we held 11 of these faculty workshops across the system. We had 192 system-wide participants, and 78 of those participants reviewed a textbook and were eligible for that stipend. Then in 2022, we kind of felt like that system-wide faculty workshop had run its course. We opened that workshop up for institutions to host as a professional development on campus for their faculty with the stipend program. So we had 13 more faculty workshops spread across 9 institutions and another 221 faculty participants. 60 of those participants also reviewed the textbook and were eligible for stipends through the same grant program. And then you can see the institutions that participated. And again, you can also see that our faculty workshops weren't limited to just our public institutions. Bethany College jumped in and we sent trainers there. We also did another training for an organization, which was a librarian organization. And again, those 2 groups weren't eligible for the stipend program, but we still sent trainers and did the workshop. So we have some fantastic trainers in our system, volunteer trainers that are happy to help and share this information. So, so you can kind of see, that's why I put 221 plus, because we got to more participants than we were even able to share stipends with. And that was all the same introductory faculty workshop. Building on that, for 2023, our trainers have created a new series called Beyond the Basics. And they've started, and the topics are finding, evaluating, and adopting OER. So that was the first one they did. The second one is adapting OER, and the third one is accessibility in OER. The first two have already happened, and those recordings are online. And then the third one will be happening the first week of April. And this series was created, authored and created by our trainers, and now is out and available to share with anybody who is interested. And then you can see our discipline roundtables that we started in the fall and the spring, and that's where we really utilized those discipline liaisons. So the fall, we had a science, English and humanities, and a mathematics roundtable. And again, these were really informal, kind of hour-long discussion-based. They were led by those discipline liaisons. They kind of brought some topics, but honestly, they shared their resources and then opened it up for conversations with their peers across the system. And then this spring, we had business, languages, and education faculty, and we'll keep those roundtables going. Into next year. So we've got a really great process there. All of these trainings were built by our volunteer trainers. So we have a fantastic team of trainers, faculty trainers that have been doing some really great work. So on the horizon, so as we move into next academic year, we are looking at getting a KBOR system subscription for LibreText, which is a open text library and repository for all of our 32 institutions. So it would be a repository for the Kansas Board of Regents, where we can keep collections of open text that our faculty create. But all of our institutions would have access to that as well. And then it also gives faculty access to all of the different texts and collections within the LibreText software. And it gives them the ability to adopt and adapt and create their own OER text curriculum within the software. Now, all of the 32 institutions can create up to 5 texts for free. And if they want to go beyond 5 texts within the system, then they have to have an allied membership. And we have 5 institutions starting hopefully sometime this summer with that allied membership. And then we're hoping to add 9 more institutions in the second year with the intention that we would be able to provide that allied membership to any institution that wants that down the road as we go. So we'll be building that in. In January 2024, we're joining with the Midwest Higher Education Compact States to do a regional OER summit. We did one in Kansas last February, which was a great success, but we really felt like if we could team up with our regional states, that would be pretty powerful too. So we're excited about that. And then this coming summer, we'll be working on our legislative ask to include this coming fall, to ask for some statewide funding for continued funding for OER initiatives across the board for both our public institutions and even maybe possibly our private institutions, for some grant funding, some continued OER funding from the legislature. So that's kind of some of the initiatives we're eyeing as we go. And then I shared with the chief academic officers that our 3rd annual institutional survey is just about to go out. And you guys have seen the results of this survey. I think we shared it in September. So this is our 3rd annual round. It will look very similar to what we did, but it gives us a way to measure how those initiatives are changing, what's happening at our institutions. And so this is about to go out probably in the next week, and then we'll be able to report back those findings likely in this coming September. So the last thing I wanted to show you was the steering committee. I had the ability to travel to Atlanta and participate in an OER and dual credit steering committee, or OER and dual credit conference in Atlanta with the Southern Educational Regional Board. And there were some folks there talking about what was happening in Kansas with regard to OER, which is pretty exciting. And it's not because of me, it's because of the people on this list. And we have some fantastic faculty volunteers that are amazingly knowledgeable about the open education resources. They do some fantastic work with faculty in our system, in our institutions, and they do some really great work. Working with this steering committee every month is really one of the perks of my job. And so they're doing some really great work, and it is it's fun to do this, and it doesn't happen in every state. I will say that. So the things that are happening in Kansas are largely due to this group of people, and we are lucky to have them. So that's the back of our postcard, and you can see 25 faculty and staff volunteers representing 23 of our 32 institutions, serving all the educators in Kansas, K through 12, higher ed, and we are always ready to take more folks that want to get excited about OER and share that information. So if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but otherwise there's some exciting stuff, and I can't wait to show you more tomorrow.
Great report. Thank you so much. Comments or questions?
Thank you for your leadership. Yeah.
What does success look like for you as you think about how we continue to grow this initiative?
Ooh, well, that's a great question. I think for, as we look at that, I think a big marker for us is if we can find a way. Sustainability seems to be a big word in this. And in fact, yesterday in our meeting, we were talking about, open education. One of the hardest things is we're talking about free or low cost resources, but they're not free to do. So, and cost and is really one of the barriers. Funding is a barrier for increasing OER resources in our institutions. And that continues to be one of the barriers that is reported in our surveys each year. And so I think as we look at that legislative ask, one of the things that we've put together is to try to ask for a grant fund that we could make available to both our system-wide initiatives, but also make available for institutions and individuals to say, maybe we'd like to try this program or this initiative, and they could apply to K-Board to say, could we try this to expand our OER initiatives? And we would have some money to be able to say, yeah, give that a try. And so I think that's part of what we've set up in that legislative ask and in that money. But I think too, OER we've seen in other states has not been a Republican or a Democrat type of issue. I mean, it's something that everyone can support because it benefits all students. And so my hope is that by saying this is something that our private institutions could access, our public institutions could access, it's money that's available to all institutions. Maybe that maybe even could make it more accessible. So I think that's one measure of success for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think another one that we look at is how do we, down the road, how do we set up some consistent reporting? And how do we also set up some consistent course marking so that students can see which courses are available for OER versus, not. And some of our institutions have that and some of them don't. That's easier said than done. That's actually a very complicated process. So when I say that, I don't want it to seem like, oh, we just flip a switch and that magically happens. But we also don't have any consistent reporting from the institutions to our system about OER at all. And so I think those are like some big dream things down the road that would be great, that would give us some system-wide data. So again, we're taking some small steps here, but I think those are on Dr. Archer's list, I think, down the road, but we haven't figured out a way to make those happen yet. So.
Well, again, this is so significant in terms of our affordability strategy. So thank you for your enthusiasm. This doesn't feel like small steps. It feels like big steps, and let us know how we can continue to support.
Thank you.
Well done. All right, very good. Speaking of a heavy lift and great work, if you recall, Regents, we just approved the additional foundational metrics at our last meeting. And I'm very excited to have with us today Judd McCormick and Matt Keith and the team who's been working on taking those foundational metrics and putting them in a accessible and visually engaging format. So we wanted to give you an update today and frankly get your feedback on whether or not you think we're moving in the right direction. So you have at your place a very small copy of the dashboard, but Amy's going to put it up online so that you can see it. And I'm going to invite Judd or Matt, I don't know who wants to take the lead and just kind of setting the framework for the design and then walking through some of the attributes. Looking at you, Matt, do you want to start off? You want Judd to take it?
Sure.
Sure.
Judd, if you'd like to go ahead, go for it. Amy, if you could maybe add down.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to. So what Amy has up there, so really what we've done is we put together kind of a complex mock-up of really the design that we're trying to go for with the strategic plan portal. Like Regent Lane had mentioned that you guys have approved the foundational metrics. So really what we're trying to get accomplished is getting the foundational metrics added to the existing strategic plan portal, but what we had out there currently really was kind of matching back to the existing strategic plan. So the print pieces, we had some tables, we had some charts. It was only one level of information. And what we're accomplishing here with the next phase, so to speak, is that with this mock-up, some of the key things I would point out that's different than our existing portal. I'd start with the very top with our filtering system. Right now, the only thing that we have is basically the publication year that you could switch. But the goal is to have the multiple layers of information, because some of our data is available at a system-wide look, at a institutional type or sector, as well as institution. And so adding those additional drop downs will be one of those key pieces that we'll have. And then, making everything more consistent feeling with a dashboard with the charts instead of having tables and charts. That's not to say that we won't have tables at some point in time, but really for the time frame and resources to get that visual look of how we're doing, we're opting to kind of go with charts here. And so that's kind of what we're seeing here on this. This would really be the affordability area of focus that Amy has up now. And so you can see that we have multiple charts on there going across the board with the name of the metric, as well as a numbering system that we're using. It's really kind of more for us internally, but it can certainly be used to talk about a particular metric. And then one of the other things I'd point out in our existing formats that we have was we kind of reused the navy and the gold sequencing a lot throughout. When I first started doing this mock-up, having all the navy gold sequencing like that really kind of was boring, to be simple, and you really didn't want to look at it all that much. So really what we're trying to do now is use all the colors that we have in the color palette that we've established at KBOR, and try to tie data elements together with that color palette. So kind of those second two charts, what you see there, it's kind of data that is tied together. It's not the exact same data, but it's kind of tied together in that need-based grant and scholarship aid. If you scroll down a little bit more, Amy, we'll get into another section here on that on-time pace for graduation. You can see that we have a full-time and a part-time, so it's really the same metric, but we have two different elements there. And so what we wanted to do is either tie those together with that color scheme, or also in that numbering convention, because we have several data elements. Enrollment gaps would be another one that's on the access tab or the access area of focus. That we're looking at Pell eligible, we're looking at rural, non-rural, we're looking at race, ethnicity, as well as gender. So as you can see right there, all those are the same kind of data element. So we wanted to tie those together so you knew they were similar data types, but they're actually on individual charts there. So all those green ones are really kind of all those enrollment gaps, but it's a 4 different data types. So it's kind of what we're trying to do with this mock-up to kind of give us a path forward of what direction we want to go. And by using the different colors like this and the sequencing, it's visually more appealing, and it makes the different data elements stand out a little bit more. And so I would say of the things that we're looking to accomplish, those are probably really the 3 big hitters of what we're looking to do as far as grouping the data together, organizing the data so it's more functional when you're trying to find it, and really having the multiple layers of data available through whether it's system, the sector, the institution, as well as, we're doing a public university or 4-year sectors, or we're also putting together 2-year sectors. Now, not all the data will be available for that, but Amy, if you could click back on the affordability tab. One of the things that we'll do is if you scroll down just a little bit more, for example, the meta majors is something that's a work in progress. Scroll back up just a little bit, Amy. There's kind of a blank space there on the left, right there. Thank you. What we would do is if you chose any particular level, if there wasn't data available for that level, say that particular institution or that particular sector, we would have a message in there that would pop up that would tell you, that data is not available for the filters that were chosen, whether it's the publication year or the level of institution type that you chose. And if we happen to have where, none of the data is available in that particular area of focus for an institution, or let's say technical colleges in general, that's not really going to be the case. But what we do is we'd have one generic note that would pop up, so you're not just scrolling through seeing 12 blank windows with that message in it. So that's kind of the vision that the team had that we were working on. Cindy Ferrier, Matt Keith, as well as Marty Leisinger and her team, as well as my team. We're kind of all kind of a group effort putting this together, and wanted to share this mock-up to make sure that we're grabbing the vision that you were hoping for on this project.
Thank you, Judd. I think the team's done a remarkable job. So wanted to get feedback from you all about whether or not we're on the right track. Any questions you have about what Judd has covered?
I think it looks great.
Good. So I really applaud the team for trying to make this, we're not trying to duplicate the existing data system. We'll be able to drill down if we want more detail, but this is designed to be like the dashboard in our car, if you will, to give us a quick look as how we're moving forward with the foundational metrics. The numbering system, I just want to applaud the team for thinking about that. So this is the Pillar 1 dashboard, so it'll all start with a 1. When we move to Pillar 2, Pillar 3, it'll start with 2 and 3. That just makes it easier for the data team and discussions. And then I just have to say how much I appreciated the decorator touch here in terms of affiliating like metrics with similar color schemes. So you can know that those are those ones we talked about that kind of cluster together. They're all in that color scheme. So next steps, Matt, do you want to update the team on
Sure.
some next steps?
So we will, I think Judd and his team are going to be working on trying to get all of these metrics up by June 1st. And then obviously as the subcommittee works to develop additional metrics and bring those before the board, those will be added later on down the road. The other step is thinking about how we can elevate this. So it is currently, the dashboard is accessible on the website. It rotates through on our homepage, and we have a little icon, but we're going to be thinking about how can we elevate that. And we are doing some website work. I think President Flanders has informed you. And so as we're going through that, part of that will be how are we elevating the strategic plan and the strategic plan dashboard to a more prominent position on our website as somebody's coming to visit our homepage.
Thank you very much. There's a lot behind the scenes that goes into this idea that we had to have data accessible. One question I do want feedback on, and certainly anybody can provide feedback. We discussed whether or not we want to prioritize the foundational metrics so that the things that we think are most important are the ones we see first. So what are your thoughts about that, and how do we go about identifying which are the most important?
Regent Lane, if you don't mind, if I jump in, just to let you know, really the main purpose of that is because we didn't really have a direction in the order of those metrics. So really kind of, and I'll fall on the sword, so to speak, for this. Really what I've done so far is I kind of have gone with what you might think of as a chronological order of that student. So we're kind of starting out with, are they a Pell recipient? Is it need-based grants? And then we got into scholarships and dollars awarded. And then a little bit further down, we start looking at the course load and the attrition rate. So it's kind of like as they're working through, as before they start with our institutions, after they start with their institutions, and then finally, on the affordability, we get around to, kind of the student loan amount at graduation time and the default rate. So that's kind of how we grouped it to start with, mostly because I wasn't exactly sure, maybe there are specific elements that we want to look at in each of the area of focus. So we can even zoom in a little bit tighter, even on those areas of focus, but that's kind of really how they're organized now. So somebody was to look at it and they wanted to know, what particular order I went with as far as the metric numbers go. And that's really kind of was my thought process. So not saying it was a great one, but that was kind of how we do things in key stats. So I kind of just stuck with the ideology of it.
Yeah, that logic makes a lot of sense. I'm going to call on you, Provost Bickelmeyer, maybe to share some thoughts about other logic that we should think about, or maybe this is a topic for your team to go back to.
I can't speak for all provosts, certainly, but I'd say I actually really appreciate what Judd just said. And there is something called the progression momentum framework that's generally a 5-phase structure to think about student success, which talks about entry to admissions to, I can't remember the names of them now, but entry, admission, or application, admission, kind of entry phase, and then the first matriculation phase, and then that mid-cycle, and then starting to get ready for completion, and then to transition. And I think actually we do need to look, it's a very student-facing way to think about it, so that you are thinking about a student-centric model. So actually I applaud Judd for that, and I think that's probably the most holistic way you can really comprehend what a student's experiencing. I would offer, though, it may be that there's a couple that are at the end that you might want to put up front. So affordability, really, while it's a final number, it's affected the whole way through. So that's a question we might want to be looking at as we're building the entire experience. So that would be the one I myself would suggest put that up front, so that it's on top of mind for everybody, that we want to make sure that we are as student-centric as we can, but that we are helping students to have the most affordable experience they can.
Yeah, very good. Thank you for that feedback. All right, Judd. Sounds like your logic is the way of the day. So we appreciate it.
Stop
Any
the
other
clock is right twice a day.
Thanks. All right. Thank you very much. Really
you.
appreciate and the teams worked hard throughout late yesterday to make sure we had this report for us today. So I want to recognize that. Very appreciative. So now we're ready for an update from Dean Brewer, who is the Dean of the Teachers College at Emporia. She's representing the educator workforce and going to provide us an update on the progress for implementing those approved strategies.
All right, good
Brewer.
evening, and thank you, Regent Lane, and everyone for providing us the opportunity to give you this update. So the specific areas that I'm going to provide an update in that we're progressing on are the universal elementary transfer pathway, as well as the statewide structured literacy plan. So to start with the University Elementary Associate's degree transfer pathway, the lead on that is Dr. Paul Adams from Fort Hays State University. And as part of the original Educator Workforce Task Force document, that he worked with a group of individuals representing each of the institutions to create a 60-hour transfer program framework with that 60 hours built in, and it was well aligned to the new gen ed buckets that are coming forward. So the next step really with that then is taking that framework and having a series of summits, the first of which has already been scheduled. That particular summit will include KBOR teacher prep institutions, members of KBOR, and KSDE staff. The goal of those first few summits really is to address individual institutional needs, especially for things centered around accreditation and state approval, as well as addressing some of the institutional variations among programs and still keeping this within the 120 hours. So once those things are ironed out, then we will begin to include community colleges in those summits, really to finalize the plans and ensure fidelity to the program. The goal of this particular group is to complete their work by June 30th of this summer, with the expected launch by fall of 2024. The second group that's working on the statewide literacy plan is being led by Dr. Debbie Mercer from K-State and Dr. Jim Truelove from Pittsburgh State University. The task force does include literacy experts from all of the KBOR institutions. And this task force is really taking kind of a two-pronged approach. The very first approach is more of a quick start plan. But the goal is then to take what's built from the Quick Start plan and really be able to expand it into a longer term strategy for addressing the literacy needs of Kansas schools, teachers, and students. Because we know that research really shows us that, a shot in the arm professional development, while it helps, it's the long-term sustainability of that professional development that's really going to have the kind of impact that we want to see. So in terms of the Quick Start plan, that work is already underway. Each of the institutions has provided experts to Dr. Mercer and Dr. Truelove to form a task force that is going to start work on core learning materials. And those core learning materials are going to include online curricular modules for pre-service teachers. The goal is that those will be included and required in all KBOR institutions' pre-service preparation programs. It includes some collaboration with KSDE licensure and other literacy experts just to make sure that we are meeting the needs of Kansas schools and teachers. And so the goal with this is to get these particular modules, pilot them this next fall of 2023, with full implementation of these modules in pre-service teacher preparation programs by spring of 2024. The second piece of these core learning materials is to prepare Zoom presentations that will be a collaborative approach by the region's institutions for all in-service teachers. And the goal will be to deliver those in summer or early fall of 2023. Those particular Zoom presentations will include 3 additional supplemental learning opportunities or specific focus areas for students with special needs, supporting those students, English language learners, and students with dyslexia. So those will be 3 supplemental areas added. One of the concerns with the Zoom presentations for in-service teachers is ensuring that individuals will participate. So we believe pretty firmly that some kind of a marketing messaging is going to be critically important in getting this information out. We'll need KBOR's help in a statewide messaging, as well as then the institutions themselves will pick up sending personalized communication to our alumni, and then also working with KSDE and other professional organizations to get this training out. And again, this training will be free for educators. One of the things we've built in to this Quick Start plan for the in-service teachers are classroom applications and stipends for the educators, specifically focused on ensuring that we target one curriculum specialist from each of the public school districts in Kansas to complete the training, and then as many classroom educators as we're able to support participating in that. One of the goals out of this then is that the individuals who do participate in those Zoom presentations, the in-service teachers, help contribute to a statewide repository of classroom application ideas that any teachers throughout the state will be able to draw from for ideas. One of the things that we're still trying to figure out, it'll take a bit to figure out, is how do we pay these individual teachers and districts. And so we've been working with Regent Lane and Blake Flanders as well to try to kind of talk through some of these and figure these things out. The final thing that I wanted to share is that Commissioner Randy Watson reached out to the Council of Education Deans, and we talked a bit about potential avenues, additional avenues for attracting teachers into the teaching profession. And I know that Commissioner Watson has also talked with Regent Lane and President Flanders on these things as well. So more conversation will come forward, I'm sure, with Dr. Watson. The other thing that the education deans are monitoring at this time has to do with the Registered Apprentice Program. There is legislation right now with funding attached to it going through the Kansas legislature. We're monitoring this. Where we landed on our task force report was having KSDE really take the lead when it came to the Registered Apprentice and serving kind of as that intermediary, working with districts who wanted to make use of the Registered Apprentice Program, and then working with institutions of higher education for that coursework. Additionally, also WSU is very well positioned with their TAP program. So I know that they're exploring some opportunities within the Registered Apprentice as well. So that's the update. Any questions?
That's a terrific report, Dean Brewer. Any questions or comments?
I just had a comment. I just wanted to express my appreciation for the added supplemental areas within the literacy framework, addressing the needs of every student and not just grouping that into one category. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. And I will pass that on.
I too want to just continue to thank the deans and the extended groups working on this. You're moving at lightning speed. It's critically important, and thank you for adding this on top of your already overtaxed workloads to make sure that we move it forward. So all three strategies.
You bet. And we would like to thank you for giving us this opportunity. It's been very much appreciated.
All right. Thank you very much, Dean Brewer.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
You too. Dr. Archer, we're now ready for you to give us an update on our program review and instructional workload next steps.
Yeah, thanks. So obviously it's something we've been looking at for really over the last year. And so kind of where we're going here in the near future is the university provosts are working on drafting some new criteria for the program review process. And they are going to present that with Leach down at Pitt State on April 15th. So that'll be something to look forward to. With the idea and really the goal of bringing it to the full board in May. So Provost Bickelmeyer, you may want to elaborate on that.
So thank you for that. I would just add that we have shared a brief list with you previously of some particular data we think would be appropriate for you to see, or that align with the board's current criteria around the demand for the program, centrality of the program to fulfilling the mission and the role of the institution, the quality of the program is assessed by its strengths, productivity, qualifications of the faculty, quality of the program is assessed by its curriculum and impact on students, demonstrated student need and employer demand for the program. Service program provides to the discipline, the universe and beyond. So there's some questions that we have there around showing the curricular dependencies and needs within the institution, how the program may otherwise utilize service courses or connect with other programs, and also what the opportunities are for comparing program data with other KBOR institutions and opportunities for program collaboration across the institutions and program cost effectiveness. And data we can provide with you on that, or for you on that. So that is out. It's on me for taking a little while. Each of the provosts have given input to a first draft of this document. I've just recently aggregated that like earlier this morning before I drove here, to get it back to the provost so that they could respond. We're asking them, or I'm asking them to look at if there's anything that's not here they think we should add, or anything here that the way we phrase that we would think we'd take off. I would present maybe one question for you as we've engaged with each other as we finalize that list. And I'll also share it with Daniel before April 19th as well to receive any comment from him. But in articulating what we think the purpose of the KBOR academic program review is, I just want to run by with you the four statements that we have underneath that, because it probably would be helpful to know that what we're doing is aligned with what you see as the purpose. First is simply to align institutional data with your 6 criteria for academic program review that currently exist. And we think you want to have appropriate, accurate data that will give you an indication of whether we're meeting those criteria. Secondly is we think you want to ensure that each institution is appropriately addressing low enrolled programs. Third, we think you want to ensure that we're making adjustments based on student demand and capacity. And then fourth, we think you want to review and adjust as appropriate the number and blend of programs within the KBOR system. And again, that one's out of our sphere as individual provosts generally, but I think if we answer those questions about what are opportunities for collaboration and how might we be comparing our program and either distinction or its uniqueness in other ways with other programs in the system, that may be the information you need to help inform you. So we think that's what you are going for. Is that what you think you're going for?
Insight. Regents.
Provost, what was number 3? How did you word that?
Number 3 was to ensure that we're making appropriate adjustments based on student demand and capacity.
Okay, thank you.
It's in some ways a subsection, but you can be adjusting or addressing low enrolled programs without doing that based on certain kinds of data. So we do want to make sure we get student need and demand in there.
As my colleagues are thinking, I really appreciate the articulation of the 4 areas, which really, number 1 is really much broader than one thing. My wondering is if, particularly thinking about number 4 and your comment that it's out of your purview, how the provost might guide the board to think about productive duplication. While I think that the word duplication has gotten way too much attention in this entire process because that's not where we started, it is an important and frankly, the item that you brought to our agenda just last month and that's on for the full board, that circles there. So I would encourage you to think about how we should view that productive duplication based on regional needs, based on market demand, those kinds of things. That would be very helpful to us.
Thank you. I think we have a solid start on that. I'm sure we could go back and talk about that a little bit more with that input.
The other thing to think about, we call out low enrollment programs, and certainly I think that that's critically important. But I also wonder about our agility to add programs that come up that are emerging areas of study, and how we might think about a process that would allow for a little more agile responsiveness, if you will, to the market.
I do think that as the provost and I have been in conversation, and again, I can't fully speak for them, I'd say we do see that the same kinds of things you would want to review on would probably be the same things you would want to approve on in some capacity or another. They're tightly linked. So I do know, and I can't really speak to processes fully because each institution has time in this process based on what happens in their own institution, because at a micro level, for example, at KU, we're having these conversations. When you bring up analytics, everybody wants analytics, right? When you talk about statistics, everybody thinks they own statistics. So we have some internal institutional review where we're looking at how does this align with our own programs there. And then you have the board review. You also have an HLC approval for a brand new program that our institutions go through. So I don't know how we get away from time in terms of appropriate vetting, but I do love and appreciate the recognition that if we can be more responsive in a more expeditious way, I'm sure we would all be happy to weigh in on that.
Perhaps just that reminder would be a good thing as we continue to talk about that. One other thought that I had, and would appreciate the provost weighing in on, is if I recall right, RPK recommended annual review of programs. Is that right, Dr. Archer? Am I thinking about that?
Yeah, higher scrutiny on the lower enrolled programs, in particular, the ones they highlighted based on the metrics that they had.
So as you work through the recommendations, it would be quite insightful, at least from my thinking, to understand is that a viable recommendation?
And again, I can't speak for a provost, and I really can't speak for the board staff here. I think that's one reason why what we would want to do as provost is make sure we're not providing a bunch of things to look at, and particularly a bunch of qualitative things to look at, much like the dashboard you're creating. What are the few metrics that really matter that can be automated as much as possible, that gives you a reason to just schedule annually you're looking at that. And I do think we're providing a few lines here that are the metrics that matter in terms of program review. And I do think my understanding of what RPK was saying there, and again, it's only my understanding, is something to that effect of if you have the right data and there's a few key data points and it's automatic, you can annually be looking at that instead of asking each institution to provide a self-study for every report they have. But that's my takeaway. I don't know if you see something differently than that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that you just kind of end up looking at the same programs over and over. And I think we've really kind of done that already, because a lot of the things that came up in RPK were the things that came up in the low enrollment program review that we did, which I know kind of predates you all, but we went through and did a extensive review of all the programs that had below 25 students or 25 majors. And we did that 2021 year. And so a lot of that we saw in the RPK report were programs were already reviewed. So.
Anything else?
Madam Chair, is there any mechanism for conversation with, say, the Department of Commerce or someone who maybe has a holistic view of our state's economy and is looking down the line to see these are the kinds of positions that will be in demand in 5 or 10 years? I guess I'm not extremely clear or very clear on exactly how we identify those programs that we're not currently offering, but we should be looking at.
Great point.
What's the best mechanism for doing that?
I'll defer to Daniel. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think our universities do a really good job of trying to keep up with trends that are and things that they're projecting for the future as well. But obviously, if that's something we wanted to try to do, to have somebody come over and maybe give a 5 or 10 year projection, just a very high level overview, that could be beneficial for everyone. If that's something that we want to look at, we can certainly make that happen on our end.
And I would just say again, speaking only for KU, but from an institutional or this institutional perspective, we are constantly looking at reporting. We have a data information system that we have a license to called Lightcast, which is nationally, if not internationally recognized, that looks at labor market data, economic data generally, to try to predict or not predict, look at patterns of growth and then give opportunities to respond to those patterns of growth. And they tie that to the OECD Economic Outlook Handbook in terms of the kinds of jobs that are available, job openings that are posted, and just generally information and intelligence they gather about economic labor trends. So it's a pretty comprehensive database. It does actually give information about institutional programs as well. So we're generally working that. And as much as anything, back to the point that, again, for a place like KU, we have hundreds of programs. It's not that we necessarily always want to be adding more programs, but what we really need to do, because our alumni tell us this, the business environment tells us this, we need to make sure that as trends are changing, that we're keeping those programs fresh, and that the outcomes that our graduates have mastered are the ones that the economic sectors want. Analytics is a really good example, and we just had in the Council of Chief Academic Officers a presentation today from Emporia State about changing the name of a program and inserting some analytics in that and getting cybersecurity in that. I think that's a good example. We've always taught things that are tied to using data in business, for example, or thinking about safety and security. But there's some really significant trends occurring, and there's some really important market and labor data about what we need to do, and outcomes that are being shared with us that we need to address. So I just say those are some examples of the kinds of things that are at play for us.
Thank you.
And one thing that's a point of interest that relates to that is that we are kind of working on a draft of a research proposal with Dr. Donna Ginther, really excellent economist at KU, and really trying to have an attainment goal that's very Kansas specific, that really outlines this is how many bachelor's degrees that we need to produce, this is how many associate degrees that we need to produce, this is how many certificates that we need to produce, to go down to that really granular level, but also highlight the industries with the highest growth and really try to do like 10-year projections. And I think that'll be really helpful for the board to see. And there may be some information from that can help enhance the process and some of our planning.
Great question. And thank you. Thank you both for your insight. It was really appreciated. And we look forward to the update next month. If there's anything that we could be doing that's helpful, Provost Bicklemeyer, in the meantime, please don't hesitate to reach out. Okay. Thank you.
Regent Lane, could I add something?
Sure.
There is an expedited program approval process through the board that institutions can embark upon if they want to respond quickly. I mean, it's really just a 3 to 4 month approval process at the board office. So it's not going to cut the time and, by that much, but it would help. And I can't speak to the university processes on each campus as to how long it takes a program proposal to go through the approval processes there. But we are trying to do things to make it a little bit quicker and easier.
Great. I think we've only had, has it just been 1 or 2 takers? There haven't been one since I've been here.
There's nothing in the last 3 years that I know of. So
I'd also just mention to that, and institutions really work on cycles, right? I mean, there's semester dates and summer dates, and we ourselves actually were just meeting yesterday, trying to be more nimble in terms of how often start dates can occur for students. But there are so many regulations at so many levels, whether it has to do with federal Title IV funding, as I'm sure you all are aware of. But and you're building, and once you build it, you're building it. So matters of months aren't necessarily that important, except for I do think you see us squirming when we get a little close to spring, because if we've been moving things along, we're trying to get those in the pipeline to advertise those for the fall semester. So I think it's just, when is that gate that matters, that either you're going to advertise it for the next year or you're going to have to wait the year after. And usually that's late fall, early spring, which is where we are now.
Again, great insight and reminders for us. Thank you very much. Final item under other matters is an update from Dr. Archer on the system-wide general education package.
Yeah, and this is just a really quick update. The first milestone, we created the timeline here, really the next 16 or 17 months. And the first milestone is coming up. It's we just have a little implementation check-in form, just 5 or 6 questions. It just kind of gives the status of the implementation on the campus that is due coming up on April 1st. And some of the community colleges, quite a few community colleges actually already submitted, which has been great, but just wanted to make sure everyone remembers that's coming up on April 1st. And then also just wanted to highlight too that we had a question at one point about what we're calling bucket 7, which is the institutionally designated bucket that an institution defines for the general education in 6 credit hours. And there was a question at one point about having it more general and having it where, a wide array of credit or even free elective type credit could apply there, and whether or not that was acceptable there. And I certainly didn't see a problem in it, and talked to Regent Kiblinger about it a couple of times, and she was very supportive of that idea. So I just wanted to kind of reemphasize that, because that was one of the things that came up at one of our webinars, whether or not that was okay. And I absolutely think it is. And she was very supportive of that idea, and really, I think, encourages institutions to be as flexible as possible there. So.
All right, Regents, you can see what we have on schedule for our next meeting on April 4th. Read those out loud. You can see them. Is there anything else that needs to be added to that agenda? Amy, did we do everything procedurally that needed to be done?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. So I'll take a motion to adjourn, please.
So move.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Right. Great meeting. Thank you all very much.
Well done.
Good job.
Pressure.